relationship, which forms the foundation of our country's governance. In this session, I will give an overview of how the Federal Constitution divides power and responsibilities between the federal and state government. I will focus on three main aspects: the division of powers, the concept of autonomy, and the principle of constitutional supremacy. For each, I will highlight the key similarities and differences between the federal and state levels, supported by clear tables and explanation. By the end of this presentation, you will have a clear understanding of how these constitutional principles work in Malaysia and how they shape the relationship between federal and state governments. Let's begin by exploring how the Federal Constitution ensures both the federal and state governments share a common foundation for their powers in Malaysia. Both levels of government derive their authority directly from Federal Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. To make this clear, let's look at a comparison table. As you can see, both federal and state governments are structured by a three branch: legislative, executive, and judicial, and both have the authority to make law and administer their own affairs within their representative jurisdiction. This parallel structure helps maintain order, clarity, and consistency throughout the country. Now, let's move on to the difference of power division between federal and state governments. The Federal Constitution also sets clear boundaries on what each level of government can do, and these differences are crucial for understanding how Malaysia is governed. For example, the federal government is responsible for national matters such as defense and finance, while state governments focus on local issues like lands and religion. In the event of a conflict between the federal and state law, federal law always prevails. Additionally, Sabah and Sarawak have a special provision granting them greater autonomy compared to other states. In summary, both the federal and state governments in Malaysia are established by the Federal Constitution and have their own legislative, executive, and judicial branch. This structure allows each to govern within its own area of authority. However, the federal government holds wider powers, especially over national matters like defense and finance, as well as controls most major revenues. States focus on local issues and often depends on federal funding. In any conflict, federal law prevails, and Sabah and Sarawak have a special autonomy under Malaysian Agreement 1963.
Next, I'll be talking about the fascinating topic of autonomy. This slide specifically focusing on the similarities between the federal and state governments. While the federal government and state governments operate on different levels, they share fundamental similarities in their autonomy, ensuring a balanced and structured governance system. Firstly, let's look at their legal foundation. Both the federal and state governments derive their authority directly from the Federal Constitution. This means their very existence and powers are enshrined and protected by the highest law of the land, providing a strong and consistent legal basis for their operations. Secondly, both levels of government enjoy constitutional protection. Their autonomy is not merely implied but is explicitly safeguarded by constitutional provisions. This protection prevents arbitrary overreach from one level of government to another, ensuring each can function within its designated sphere without undue interference. Moving on to their powers, both the federal and state governments have exclusive jurisdiction in certain areas. This means that each level possesses specific dedicated powers that the others do not. For example, the federal government handles matters like defense and foreign affairs, while state governments manage land and local governments matters. This division of power is crucial for efficient governance and reflects the principle of federalism. Finally, a critical similarity is their subjection to judicial oversight. Both the federal and state governments, despite their autonomy, are subject to constitutional judicial review. This means that their actions and laws can be challenged in court to ensure they comply with the federal constitution. This mechanism acts as a vital check and balance, upholding the rule of law and protecting the rights of citizens. conclusion, while the areas of responsibility differ, they shared legal foundation, constitutional protection, exclusive jurisdiction in their respective domains, and accountability through judicial oversight are the cornerstones of the autonomous yet interconnected nature of our federal and state governments. This framework ensures stability and effective governance for the nation. Now, that we've explored the similarities, we'll delve into the difference in the next segment. In the scope of autonomy, the federal government handles broader national matters while state government focus on limited state-specific issues. For financial autonomy, the federal government controls major revenue sources, giving it greater independence, whereas state governments have more limited revenue. Regarding amendment power, only the federal government can pass constitutional amendments. State governments cannot. Finally, in terms of override powers, the federal government has a larger hierarchy and greater resources, while state governments are limited by their own resources and capacity. This distinction highlights the unique roles and limitations of each of the governments. Now that we've understood the fundamental similarities in autonomy between the federal and state government, let's turn our attention to where they diverge. These differences are crucial for understanding the distinct roles each level of government plays. While both operate with a degree of autonomy, the scope and nature of that autonomy vary significantly. Let's break down these distinctions. Let's further summarize the core similarities and differences in autonomy. Building on what we've discussed, first, it's crucial to remember that the federal constitution sets the framework for both the federal and state levels of government. It defines their powers and limitations. Secondly, a shared responsibility is that both must uphold constitutional rights. This is a fundamental duty for every level of government. Now, for some key nuances. The federal government can legislate on the state list under certain conditions, for example, to ensure uniformity or implement international treaties, showing a flexible aspect of federal power. Conversely, state may legislate on unlisted matters, those not specifically mentioned in the federal or concurrent list, highlighting a residual power for the states. And very importantly, given our location, Sabah and Sarawak possess special autonomy. This is a critical distinction, granting them unique powers and safeguards under Constitution. Recognizing their distinct historical and political entry into Malaysia, these points collectively paint a comprehensive picture of the intricate balance of autonomy within our federal system. Let's now focus on the fundamental similarities concerning constitutional supremacy for both the federal and state governments. At the core, both levels are constitutionally bound. This means they are inherently governed and limited by the federal constitution, which stands as the supreme law of our nation. This supremacy imposes law-making limits. Neither the federal nor state government can enact laws that are contrary to the provisions of the Constitution. Any such law would be deemed invalid. Furthermore, both are subject to judicial review. This is a crucial check and balance, meaning the actions and law can be challenged in court to ensure they align with constitutional principles. And finally, a shared and paramount duty for both is to uphold fundamental rights. They must ensure that the constitutional rights and freedoms of citizens are protected in all their dealings and legislation. These points highlight that despite their distinct roles, both the federal and state governments operate under the unifying and supreme authority of the federal constitution. Let's now delve into the critical differences in how constitutional supremacy applies to the federal and state governments, highlighting the federal government's overarching position. First, regarding supremacy enforcement, the federal government can enact emergency laws that override state constitutions. This is a significant power, particularly in times of national crisis. State constitutions, conversely, may be suspended in emergencies, demonstrating the federal constitution's ultimate authority. Next, the override mechanism. Parliament, at the federal level, can legislate for states in certain situations, especially in matters on the concurrent list or when national interest dictates. State governments, however, cannot override federal law. Federal law always takes precedence. Moving to amendment power, the federal government can initiate and pass constitutional amendment, reflecting its role as the guardian of the supreme law. State governments, notably, cannot amend the federal constitution. The legislative scope is limited to state matters consistent with the federal frameworks. Finally, for law precedents. This is clear-cut. Federal law prevails over state law. Consequently, state law is void to the extent of any inconsistency with federal laws. This ensures legal uniformity and prevents conflicts across the nation. This difference underscores the hierarchical nature of our federal system, where the federal government holds a superior position in terms of constitutional authority and law-making power. To wrap up our discussion, let's summarize the key takeaways, especially concerning constitutional supremacy. Firstly, despite their differences, both the federal and state governments are fundamentally bound by the federal constitution as the supreme law. This is the ultimate common ground. Secondly, while it might seem contradictory, each has its own override mechanism within its specific sphere, demonstrating a complex interplay of powers. For the federal government, federal courts interpret and enforce this supremacy, ensuring national consistency. And for the state courts must comply with the federal court decisions, reinforcing the federal constitution's ultimate authority across all jurisdictions. In essence, the federal constitution acts as the overarching framework, guiding and limiting the autonomy of both the federal and state governments, ensuring a cohesive and legally sound system of governance.
Now I want to explain about the Tort of Law in Malaysia of Construction Project. Malaysian of Tort Law, a branch of civil law, addresses a wrongful act that cause harm or injury to another party, allowing the affected individual to seek compensation. In construction, negligence is a major concern where failure to exercise reasonable care can lead to physical injury, property damage or financial loss. To establish negligence, the plaintiff must prove the defendant had a duty of care, breached the duty and caused forcible harm that resulted in damage. Construction professionals are expected to uphold safety and quality standards, and failure to do so may result in liability under tort law. Overall, tort law plays a crucial role in protecting stakeholders and promoting responsible practices in the construction industry. There are three matters that are related of tort of law in Malaysia of the construction project, which is negligence, trespasser, and nuisance. The first one is negligence. A key principle in tort law occurs when someone fails to act as a reasonable and careful person would, resulting in harm or loss to another. It is distinct from intentional wrongdoing, as it involves carelessness rather than deliberate harm. To prove negligence, four elements must be established, which is a duty of care of the defendant, a breach of the duty, a direct link between the breach and the harm caused, and actual damage or injury suffered by the claimant. In Malaysian tort law, trespass to land occurs when someone enters, remains on, or interferes with another person's lands without consent or legal authority. It is a civil wrong, does not require proof of actual damage. The unauthorized act itself is sufficient to bring a claim. Trespass can take various forms, including physical entry, refusal to leave after permission is withdrawn, or placing objects like sign or structure on the land. The law also protects the airspace above the ground beneath the land from a trespass. However, only those with exclusive possession, such as tenant or subtenant, have the legal right to sue for trespass, while landlords, licensed, and lodger generally don't. The third one is a nuisance. Under Malaysian tort law, nuisance refers to an unlawful interference with another person's use or enjoyment of land caused by goodness or excessive disturbance through action or omission. There are two main types: private nuisance, which affects specific individual, and public nuisance, which is impact the general public. To succeed in a nuisance claim, the plaintiff must prove that the interference was unreasonable and that they had a legal interest in the land. Factors such as the duration, severity, and location of the disturbance are considered by the court. The court ruled in favor of the plaintiff, emphasizing that property owners must use their land without unreasonably affecting their neighbors. Overall, the doctrine of nuisance seeks to balance the freedom to use one properties with the responsibility not to harm others' peaceful enjoyment of them. Now, I want to explain about the three methods that application in the construction setting, which is negligence, trespasser, and nuisance, that related with a tort of law in Malaysia. The first one is a negligence. The negligence is the most common tort in Malaysian construction law and arises when a party fails to exercise reasonable care, resulting in injury, damage, or loss. It typically involves contractors, subcontractors, and other personnel who have a legal duty to maintain safety and adhere to professional standards on construction site. Malaysian case law highlight the importance of complying with safety regulation and ethical practices to prevent accidents and ensure accountability. For the case example, which is Dr. Abdul Hamid bin Abdul Rashid and Anna vs. Jurusan Malaysia Consultant and ORS at 1997, properties owners sued developer contractors and engineer after a building structure failure caused significant damage. The court found the engineer negligent in design and supervision and the contractor negligent in construction. The failure to access ground condition and provide proper sample directly caused the damage. The court ruled in favor of the plaintiff, emphasizing that multiple parties in construction owe a duty of care and the neglecting professional and safety standards can result in legal liability. The second one is a trespass. Trespass is a recognized and enforceable tort in Malaysian law, especially relevant in the construction industry when unauthorized entry onto construction sites or neighboring properties can cause significant disruption or damage. Legal ruling and enforcement action emphasize the importance of respecting land boundaries and ensuring lawful access during construction activities. For the case example, which is a Phoenix Sedan Berhad versus Edenland Ceras Sedan Berhad and at 2020. In this case, Phoenix Sedan Berhad sued Edenland and its contractor for trespass after the contractor removed soil from a Phoenix land without permission. Despite having local authority approval for nearby work, the High Court ruled it was trespass, as removing soil without consent is an unauthorized interference, even without the surface damage. The court also held the developer vicariously liable due to its control over the contractor. Phoenix was aware of the damage, setting a precedent that unauthorized excavation is actionable trespass under Malaysian tort law. For the third one is a nuisance. In Malaysian construction law, nuisance refers to unwanted interference with a person's use or enjoyment of property, often caused by construction activities like excessive noise, dust, or vibration. Courts aim to balance the right of affected property owners with the need for development, ensuring progress does not come at the cost of others' comfort and property rights. For the case example, which is a Chin Mo Yen and ORS versus Chai Weng Sing and ORS at 2019. In the Chin Mo S and ORS Chai Weng Sing and ORS case, it is a condominium owner sued their upstairs neighbors for private nuisance caused by converting penthouses into dormitories and carrying out intensive renovations. The work led to excessive noise, vibration, cracking ceilings, and water spillage, which lasted over a year and were worsened by noisy tenants and poor management. While the High Court dismissed the case, the Court of Appeal ruled in favor of the plaintiff, finding the disturbance unreasonably. The landlord were held liable for approving the works, and the management corporation was fault for failing to enforce bylaws under the Strata Management Act 2013. The plaintiff were awarded on 8,000 ringgit in damages, refusing that development was not unreasonably infringe on neighboring property right.
Malaysia Construction Law Case. Bawah Malaysia SDN BHD versus 100 Vision Construction SDN BHD 2020. This case is about whether a nominated subcontractor or NSC can be held liable in tort even if they don't have a direct contract with the employer. In this situation, Bawah was the main contractor. They claimed that the NSC caused structural damage to a nearby property. However, the NSC didn't have a direct contract with the employer. The High Court decided that the NSC did not owe a cautious duty of care to the employer. Why? Because all the role and responsibilities were already clear written in the contract. So the court said that tort law shouldn't be used to program what's already agreed in the contract. The key takeaway from this case is that the court respects what's written in the contract, especially in a big construction project. That's why having a clear and well-drafted contract is so important. It helps avoid unexpected legal problems later on. Commonwealth case example. Commonwealth case in construction law, Ants versus Merton London Group, Council 1978. This case involved some leaseholders who found serious structural problems in their flats. The issue was the local council had failed to properly inspect the building's foundation during construction. So the big question was, can a public liability in tort law in construction? Liability means being responsible when something goes wrong in construction. This matter because many people are involved, like contractors, consultants, and suppliers. For example, if a structural engineer makes a mistake that causes a building to collapse, they can be held responsible even without a direct contract. To prove liability, 4 things are needed: duty of care, breach of duty, causation, actual harm or loss. It's not always clear in construction who's at fault, especially when roles overlap. For example, if a crane collapses due to poor maintenance, the person responsible can be liable. Tort law can apply even without a contract, especially if a third party is harmed. This shows that liability is not just about contract, it's about doing your job carefully and safely. If not, there can be financial and reputational damage. Now, I'll talk about defenses in tort law for construction. Even if someone is found liable, there are defenses that can reduce or remove the damage. The first is contributory negligence. If the injured person partly caused the harm, like ignoring safety rules, the court can reduce their compensation. Next is voluntary non-fit injuria, which means a person accepts the risk. For example, a worker who doesn't wear safety gear even though they know the danger. There's also statutory authority, which applies if someone was just following a legal order and inevitable accident where harm happens even after all precautions are taken. This defense helps make sure the outcome is fair and the responsible parties aren't blamed unfairly. Now, I'll talk about remedies. Remedies in tort law, especially in construction. When someone is found liable, the court provides remedies to help the injured party recover. The most common remedy is damage, which means money paid to cover losses. This includes things like repair costs, medical bills, or lost income. Sometimes, the court may give an injunction, which stops means from continuing harmful actions like unsafe construction work. In some cases, the court may order rectification, which means fixing the problems, such as repairing a building defect. These remedies help ensure that the injured party gets fair treatment and support after harm is caused. Safety protocols in construction and how they help reduce legal risk. Construction sites are full of hazards like high place, heavy machinery, and sharp tools. So, safety is not just about protecting workers, it also helps protect the company from legal problems. Basic safety gear like helmets, gloves, vests, and steel power boots is required by law under Malaysia, OSHA 1994. These are not optional. Contractor must follow them to avoid being seen as negligence. But safety isn't just about equipment. Regular site inspection are also very important. Safety officer must check for weak structures, broken scaffolding, or damaged tools. If a hazard is ignored and someone gets hurt, okay. Training and site management. A safe construction site depends on proper training and good site management. New workers should attend an induction program to learn about safety rules, emergency procedures, and equipment use. Training must continue through toolbox talk and safety briefing to keep workers alert and informed. Site supervisor play a key role by making sure safety practices are followed daily and taking action when needed. Keeping records or training, inspection, and incident is also important. These records can protect the company legally and prove that safety steps were taken. In short, proper training, strong supervision, and good documentation help prevent accidents and reduce legal risk. Insurance and legal training. Even with good safety and training, accidents can still happen on the construction site. That's why insurance and legal planning are very important. One key type of insurance is general liability insurance. It covers third-party injuries or damage. For example, if a tool falls and injures someone or crane damage nearby property, this helps protect the company from paying huge legal costs. Another important one is workers' compensation insurance. It supports injured workers with medical costs and lost wages. This reduces the chance of workers suing the company. Professional liability insurance is for roles like engineers and architects. It covers mistake in design or advice. Meanwhile, builders' risk insurance protects materials and unfinished work from fire, theft, or damage. Along with insurance, we also need strong legal planning. That means having clear contracts that explain each party responsibilities, who handles risk, and what to do if something goes wrong. Good contract can include things like limits on liability, indemnity clauses, dispute resolution steps like mediation, or arbitration. When insurance and legal planning work together, they protect everyone involved and give peace of mind if problem happen during a project.
Now we go to a conclusion and recommendation. This discussion highlights key legal principles in the Malaysian construction industry, focusing on the division of power between federal and state government and the role of tort law in resolving construction disputes. The federal constitution explains why construction laws vary by state, while tort law covering negligence, trespass, and nuisance ensure accountability and safety. Case law underscores the importance of a legal compliance and risk management. Understanding both constitutional authority and tortious duty is essential for maintaining lawful, safe, and ethical construction practices in Malaysia. This text outlines key legal recommendations for stakeholders in the Malaysian construction industry to ensure efficient operations, reduce conflict, and uphold public safety. It emphasizes understanding and complying with both federal and state laws, especially on safety, building codes, and land use. Stakeholders must secure necessary permits, strictly follow planning and zoning codes, and maintain high safety and quality standards to avoid legal liabilities. Regular inspection, legal oversight, and staying updated on regulatory changes are essential. Clear contract and documentation support effective risk management, while promoting safety awareness among workers help minimize liability. Overall, proactive legal compliance leads to safer, lawful, and professionally executed construction projects.